In today's episode, we sat down with two guests from the Frederick Center. The first guest being Maryland delegate Chris Fair and Glory. Glory Casuto, they, them, has been serving as the program director at the Frederick Center for the last 4 years. Glory is a lifelong local to Frederick County and dedicated member of the queer community. Glory graduated from Brunswick High School in 2015 and from Hood College in 2019 with a degree in social work and a minor in the study of women and gender. During their time at Hood College, Glory served as the first diversity chair of the Student Government Association Executive Board, and they received the Epitome Award from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion for dedication to social justice in the Hood community. Since starting the Frederick Center, Glory has worked with LGBTQ+ clients of all ages in advocacy, support, and services of many kind. Last but not least, our last guest, Chris Fair, is a lifelong Frederick County resident who graduated from Linganore High School in 2002, Frederick Community College in 2008, and Hood College in 2012. Chris has worked on civil rights and other community challenges for the past 20 years. He has been active with organizations including the Frederick Arts Council, the Student Homeless Initiative Partnership, also known as SHIP, Moms Demand Action, the Frederick Center, the Golden Mile Alliance, Maryland's for Marriage Equality, the Greater Frederick Advertising Federation, Frederick County Democratic Party, and the Weinberg Center for the Arts. In recognition of his strategic planning abilities, leadership skills, and contributions of many volunteer hours, Chris has been honored with the Community Foundation of Frederick County's Wertheimer Award, the Human Relations Commission's Lord Nickens Public Service Award, and Hood College's Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Award. Whew, that's a lot. He has been named the Frederick County Democratic Party Volunteer of the Year and was recently featured in the Frederick Magazine's People to Watch. Chris currently lives in Frederick City with his husband, Dominic. Enjoy the show. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we get started with all the fun questions we have, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Chris Fair. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the proud executive director of the Frederick Center, which serves the LGBTQIA+ community here in Frederick County and really all of Central Maryland. I also serve as the proud state delegate for District 3, which encompasses Frederick City, as well as Ballinger Creek, Urbana, and Spring Ridge in the Maryland General Assembly.
My name's Glory Casuto. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the program director at the Frederick Center. So I oversee all of our support programs, all of our social events, and keep operations running day to day.
Amazing. And so thankful that y'all are here in Frederick. And didn't know that you don't work with just people who live or work in Frederick County. Really sounds like it's expanded to the maybe Carroll County or Washington County folks as well.
Absolutely.
Substantially.
Yeah, we are one of the only LGBT community centers in Maryland that provides free peer-to-peer support programming. And so we have people, especially in states, neighboring states where there's a lot less support. So like West Virginia, Pennsylvania, even Northern Virginia, we have a lot of folks who travel to receive our services. So we are open to anyone who walks through our door.
That's amazing to know. I appreciate that because I feel like I should have known that and I did not, but that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves and call ourselves the red tape cutting brigade of organizations that honestly just, when the person walks in, we're not worried about zip code. We're not worried about anything. We just want to know why they're there, what the challenges they need to be lifted, and how can we help do our best we can to support them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the challenges we're going to be talking about today is power-based violence and intimate partner violence and how that impacts the LGBTQIA+ community. So that really leads me to my first question, which is, are there any misconceptions about IPV or intimate partner violence within the LGBTQIA+ community?
Absolutely. I think, especially as we had our ongoing fight for equality, and especially as it pertains to same-sex marriages, there was a lot of, generalizations about our community that our relationships are different or better than that of cisgender and heterosexual relationships. But the fact of the matter is, LGBTQ plus people are people, and we are humans too. And so the same mistakes and the same struggles that cisgender and heterosexual relationships encounter, we encounter as well. And so LGB folks are statistically 2 times as likely to experience intimate partner violence than their cisgender and heterosexual peers. And of course, we don't have as much data about transgender relationships, but we can assume that that would be even higher for trans folks.
And that data really cuts into not just, this kind of nebulous world of data. Where do we get this data from? That directly comes from our Maryland State High School data from our Youth Risk Behavioral Survey that shows that these are independent students that go to our school systems throughout the state and report this information back to the state. So we don't just know that maybe this is a problem throughout the country. This is a problem right here home in Maryland.
That's so important too. And every time that I personally talk about statistics, I usually am gathering it from like reported data, right? Like people who have actually gone to law enforcement and made a report. But there's so many reasons why someone may not feel comfortable doing that too. So I always say, like, in reality, those numbers might be a lot higher, even if it is a self-report survey. A lot of folks don't feel comfortable necessarily even writing that down.
Yeah, and to build on that really great point, when you're dealing with the LGBTQIA plus community, you're dealing with people who are out and many people who are not. And so when you're talking about reporting, you add that additional layer that people seem to not understand, that even on underreporting, it's almost impossible to quantify the data on underreporting, but we can all but guarantee that the underreporting amongst the queer community is significantly higher because of the fact that it would require the outing of the individual in the process, of which they are desperately trying to keep in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think this kind of ties into my next question, which is, why is it so important to talk about intimate partner violence through an intersectional lens, or through a lens where we're not just looking at heterosexual relationships?
Yeah, for sure. And, whenever we talk about issues facing the LGBT community, we want to look at it through an intersectional lens because our community is so diverse, and because LGBTQ plus people can be found all over the world in all different socioeconomic places and all different races. We're a very prolific community. We're everywhere. And so it's really important to look at how intimate partner violence and the impact that that has is compounded on people who are experiencing things through multiple different marginalized identities. And so, for example, we often use Black trans women as an example because they are some of our community members who are most at risk of violence. And they not only face racism for being Black, but also experience trans misogyny on top of that. And so you can't just look at it through like, oh, well, that's a person of color or that's a trans person, because a trans person of color cannot separate those identities. And all of their experiences are informed by society's influence on that. And we have to look at it as a whole rather than in pieces of the picture.
I always say that identities are like layers of a cake because I enjoy myself some cake, and those cakes all inform who we are as a human being, and each cake looks different because those layers make up different experiences. And as you add in intersectional layers of minority populations, you end up with a much different cake and a much different level of experience in society that those individuals have over people who do not have as many intersections of minority, what we refer to as minority stress, as they're not experiencing those through multiple lenses. Instead, they might just be experiencing through one.
Mm-hmm. So my question for you all is, when you're working with individuals, how do you determine the best course of action based on somebody's intersecting identity, if that is the case?
Yeah, so you start with understanding where the individual is at with the challenges that they're experiencing, to understand the unique challenges of each person that walks in the room. as I'm sure the folks at Hartley House are well aware, no two cases that come in look the same. And so to understand how those identities kind of fold into the experience that the person is having or the challenge that they're experiencing, and then trying to address as many components of those as possible with our case management team and our program director here and others to try to acknowledge and respect and understand that, this isn't just an issue of housing insecurity, right? There's potentially underpinnings of trans misogyny going on. There's potentially underpinnings of racism going on or anti-Semitism going on. And so we're trying to address those realities as we see them and try to address as many of those intersections of those systematic oppressions that the individual is experiencing as we can, understanding that, there is a really big challenge to kind of undoing societally, undoing a lot of our pre-held biases and pre-held beliefs.
So really not taking a one-size-fits-all approach.
Absolutely.
Because it's not going to work.
Very much like person-centered. We always, as I learned in school, we meet them where they are and offer them all of the opportunities and supports that are out there that might fit best, and letting them kind of choose their own adventure. And no matter what those choices might look like, we're going to be there to support and advocate for what they need and what they want, all under the same umbrella of you're safe here and we want to support you. And no matter what happens, you will be able to come back and we can decompress together and make sure that you have, wraparound services. And if we are referring to other services, we take a very much like a gentle handoff. We're never going to just be like, well, good luck in court tomorrow. Hope that goes okay. We want to make sure that everybody feels supported in all of their endeavors, even if it is not related to their LGBT identity. So that's something I think we get a lot of questions about at the center, that, oh, well, this doesn't directly relate to my being LGBTQ, but the fact of the matter is it all relates to being LGBTQ. When you're a queer person, your entire life is impacted by your identity. And so even non-queer specific issues, we're going to try and support them through that because they are a person that needs that support.
I love that. Really taking a holistic approach. And like you said, seeing that person as an individual, not, again, as a one size fits all, we're going to do the same thing with every single person. Because that's not going to work.
Right. The challenges can be consistent. We can see, we know there's housing discrimination that happens. That's a consistent challenge that we see day in and day out. Job place discrimination happens. That's a day in and day out challenge. And there's preset resources that we can apply towards those challenges that they're experiencing. However, each individual case has turns on unique details that make the case individualized and requires individual responses that are unique to each individual that walks in the door. Yeah,
absolutely. And that perfectly leads to my next question, which is in what way?
We're trying to line you up here.
Doing a fantastic job. I very much appreciate it. Thank you. In what ways can stigma or discrimination towards the LGBTQIA plus community impact survivors' willingness to seek help?
It's a great question. I think queer relationships are often, negated in the legal system, or are viewed as, not as valid as cisgender and heterosexual relationships, especially prior to 2013 with the legalization of gay marriage. Those partnerships were not they had no legal standing as a partnership. And so they did not receive the same kind of supports, the same kind of action or inaction from, community services that they, were due. And so that has changed a little bit with the legalization of gay marriage. But a lot of LGBT people fear in any services that they receive that at the end of the day, their identity is going to be not viewed as being valid. They're going to be re-traumatized, especially since so many of us, like Chris said, with our minority stress of we're already experiencing oppression in our society. And then there's the fear that that's going to be added on to when we're trying to seek such difficult support in an area that is, very much there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety. Sometimes somebody's life might have been endangered. And so those things together make us very much afraid of trying to receive the support that we need, because we're afraid that, am I going to have to explain my transgender identity? Am I going to have to defend my gay relationship before I can access the services for the trauma that I've been experiencing in general? So that absolutely impacts our ability and willingness to seek help. And I think a lot of instances of intimate partner violence will go unreported for fear of re-traumatization, fears of discrimination, the ability to receive affirming support in gender-based housing. A lot of intimate partner violence support is gender-based. And so where do trans folks go? Are transgender women going to be accepted into the women and children shelter? Where do non-binary people access that service? How do we fit into the structure that exists?
Absolutely makes sense. And two things really came to mind is one, research shows that when survivors are believed the first time they share their story, that it allows them to feel more comfortable to share their story again and again and to seek support. So I can really understand if someone is afraid that their own identity is going to be invalid, that may be another barrier, right, for them not wanting to come forward and share their story, one. And two, that at Hartley House, we do have an emergency shelter. We have 7 rooms for anyone regardless of gender, but that's a huge concern and issue too, because there are other intimate partner violence, domestic violence shelters, even in the state of Maryland, that won't even allow sons into the shelter. And that's a huge barrier of why someone may not feel comfortable staying in that shelter, let alone they usually only have cis women coming into the shelter. So it's a huge issue we see.
And to build on those both of those really great points is one component that always gets lost in this process is, and as somebody who's experienced intimate partner violence and gone through the judicial system in this process and seeking out assistance, is you become inherently aware that you lose your autonomy to hold your identity to yourself. You're no longer getting to choose if you come out or not. You are forced out of the closet the second you bring forward an intimate partner claim in a same-sex relationship. And so there's this really unique experience that is otherworldly, I'll just say, where you realize my options are my physical safety or losing my autonomy or protecting my autonomy, but risking my physical safety. And so that is one natural thing that happens. And the second is, as we look at these gendered based systems that are in place that only allow cisgender, as you said, cisgender women and cisgender men in these spaces, I remind folks often that same-sex individuals who experience intimate partner and sexual violence then are stuck inside of these spaces with the exact community that might have been the cause of their trauma to start with. And we seem to have no real logical answer for those individuals, except that they just simply must suffer inside of the same experience that many claim is the reason we can't let transgender women or transgender men in those spaces with cisgender people. We don't seem to care as much about the gay and lesbian individuals that might be suffering under the same system.
Absolutely. And especially if people are looking at intimate partner violence in a very gendered lens. I know this happens even with heterosexual cisgender relationships where not all professionals will get right who is the victim and who is the abuser, who is the survivor and who's the abuser. And not that I just imagine, research actually shows that with same-sex relationships, they, and by they I mean social service agents, law enforcement, don't get that right even more, if that makes sense. Like they can't identify who the true survivor is, as well as in heterosexual relationships.
And in 2010, the CDC, back when the federal government was taking the time to actually study this material, which was it released all kinds of really critical data that people cite all the time. And the top 3 people experiencing intimate partner violence across the entire country, across all types of relationships, number one was bisexual women. Number two was lesbian women. Number three was bisexual men. And so the top of all types of relationships that you're looking at, those three sit at the very, very top of people experiencing intimate partner violence and sexual violence. And we have to acknowledge that as a reality, that that is something that people experience day in and day out.
Absolutely. And if places like Hartley House and the like aren't taking that into account, then we're not helping all of the survivors and victims that we claim to support.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And that kind of, again, you are cueing me very nicely. I very much appreciate it. What barriers may the LGBTQIA plus community face or survivors face when accessing traditional intimate partner violence services or shelters?
Yeah, there's always the barriers that exist through the delineation of gender-based housing and services, like we mentioned. But I think especially the protections that are in place to support gay relationships who may be placed with the same gender, like Chris said, how does that work? And, you know, I think we have such diverse families now. We're seeing, you know, our gay community members are old enough to be grandparents, which is lovely and wonderful, but it also, you know, the added family dynamics of like, how do we support families and partners that don't necessarily look the same as what we might typically see in intimate partner violence shelters and support networks. So how do we stop the generalization, like you said, and make sure that each person has individualized care that's going to be best for them? I think that is a huge barrier that people don't expect in our community, that they're going to be met with individual care. They fear that they're going to be viewed in a heterosexual cisgender lens, and that is just not the way that we have lived our lives. And so it's inaccurate for the support that we're going to receive. That's not in alignment with their lived experiences.
Absolutely. Even down to like physical space as well, right? Like, I know in our shelter, like I said, we've got 7 rooms. One of them has like a separate restroom and the other is, what's it called? Like shared restroom space, right? So that may make certain individuals feel really uncomfortable. And that is totally understandable and makes sense. And that's something that as we are changing our shelter, we're trying to plan around and make sure people feel comfortable.
Intentional design for when we're dealing with intimate partner violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, and really all trauma-informed care. When we're talking about working with queer people who have layers of trauma that are usually brought into the scenario that they're coming in dealing with this intimate partner violence issue is really critical, because we're not just talking about is the therapist sitting in the room or the team of supports around them, are they practicing trauma-informed care, and are they practicing proper, gender affirming care for the individual that's experiencing this, in the case of trans individuals. But are we looking holistically at the entire walkthrough experience that the individual is going through? Are there trigger points or touch points where that individual is naturally going to regress in their treatment process because they are experiencing either a high risk or a trigger point of something that's going to cause that regression to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I so appreciate that, even down to like how organizations like Hartley House and the like do intakes, right? And what's the language that they use. And I know when I first started in this space, because I've always worked in the power-based violence space since 2019, a lot of the people that I worked with used a lot of gendered language. Yes. They always would say victim, woman, abuser, man, always. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just, the reality is that's not true. And really you have to be mindful about that and look at the documents. I think, I'm going to double check and we'll edit this, or I'll put it at the bottom if I'm wrong. But when they made the Lethality Assessment program, which is a screening that law enforcement does when they're called to a domestic dispute.
Oh, yeah.
that assessment very accurately depicts if the survivor is in danger of being harmed or killed by their abuser. And I think still to this day, and that's why, again, I'm going to research it and I'll put it in the show notes, that they still use gendered language for that as well. And it's like, that needs to change too.
And not just gendered language. I mean, that's where we decided to do a little research this morning. So we pulled up the protective order process for how people receive protective orders and the language that's used to describe both the petitioner and the respondent in that case. And it says not gender, it says sex. That, talk about a complicated word to put in when you're trying to define somebody. Because if I'm a transgender man and you're asking for sex and I haven't legally updated my gender, what exactly am I supposed to put there? And does that help? That both frustrates the legal system, the judicial system, as well as completely invalidates the identity of the person that the people that you're dealing with. So now you're re-traumatizing a person who's just trying to report and be believed of the experience that they've been a victim to.
And I've actually witnessed that in court. Not that I am an attorney or a legal advocate, but I was able to watch our attorneys in practice. This was a couple months ago, right? So this was pretty recent. And there was a transgender victim in the room, and they specifically said, like, no, that's the wrong pronoun. Do not use that. And the judge was very kind about it and changed their language, but
they didn't have to.
That they shouldn't have to do that.
Some folks who are struggling with self-advocating, and especially if you can imagine how experiencing intimate partner violence and sexual violence might impact your ability to self-advocate, a lot of trans folks struggle with self-advocating in that realm. So I think a lot of people might either not report at all for fear of having to endure that, or, give up mid-report or mid-trial, just stop trying, or have to be okay, or just endure the misgendering in order to receive the support that you need through the judicial system. And it's really upsetting to think about. And I can only imagine how trans folks who are having to go through that, it's just one thing after another, I can see how that would be really harmful for them in the long run in this process that is already so difficult.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the court system is not always the kindest, as you know, in the Maryland General Assembly, and because you work a lot with the laws and legal systems, so you know that it's not always trauma informed.
No.
Yeah. But okay.
Many times far from it.
Yes, unfortunately so. And again, this ties in perfectly to the next question. You planned very well, and I appreciate that.
It's because you sent us the questions ahead of time. We plotted.
Yeah.
I did.
No, you're just super prepared, and I really appreciate it. But are there any other ways that the legal system continues to fail LGBTQIA plus survivors, or has historically in the past?
Yeah. So I'll start and just say, like, my own personal experience was, it was certainly not a failure, but it was certainly it was an eye-opening experience to how traumatizing dealing with intimate partner violence is, and having to go before the courts and have to talk to a judge in order to get a protective order, and then meet with the sheriff's office to talk about how to serve a petition to an individual, and describe them. And it was an incredibly stressful time. It is dealing with IPV is very stressful, as any human has gone through. But then add on to that the added impact of your identity being in the forefront of that conversation, and it becomes a whole nother unique set of, like, are any of these people going to be supportive? Nothing in the process shows you any signs that you are, like, that this is going to be a normal process for you, or like that people are going to support you in this process. It's all very, I say, very cold, and I'm sure that it's kind of designed that way. But at the same time, we have so much historical trauma of walking into spaces where we might come out and somebody might start screaming at us, or somebody might tell us that we're wrong, or that that we're going to hell, or something like that. And so we literally don't know what we're walking into on any given moment. And when we're forced to be out because of the judicial process, when we're forced out, it is a really troubling experience. And so I've encouraged the court system time and time again, figure out how to get your forms updated, figure out how to make sure that there are small symbols, small affirmations that tell individual LGBTQIA plus people that if you do experience a harm, you have the same rights as everybody else, and that you should go to your court system. You should contact your law enforcement officials, because you should be protected and you will not be discriminated against in order to make that happen.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about this as we're sitting here, but I'm also thinking about all of the people that are involved in this process. Your lawyer, the jury, the judge, the police officers, the bailiff, the county clerks, every person that you have to encounter, there's a chance that that person does not believe in your identity. Mm-hmm. And then the impact of that being questioned, not being believed when you're sharing some really deep and personal details about perhaps your sex life or your relationship, facing discrimination in that way. All of that adds up to make, I'm sure, what is already, again, just such a difficult process, even more difficult. That barrier of having to face not only the institutional difficulties that we encounter as queer people, but also the individual interactions between every single person that's involved in this process. That every single person is also an opportunity to, have vitriol pointed at you for who you are, either as your gender or sexuality, your relationship, the basis of it being queerness, your identity being queer. And it just is, it's a lot to imagine that an LGBT person has to endure in order to seek justice and support. I know we have hundreds of requests every month from our clients and from the LGBT community for affirming care in every sector you could think of. Mm-hmm. People don't want to hire someone to cut down the trees next to their house unless they know they're going to be a safe person. So how do we ensure that the people, every single person along every single step of the way of this process is going to be affirming for that person and not re-traumatize them and, give them the care and the kindness that they deserve? Because if somebody is, violently transphobic and they encounter someone who's trying to report their hardships and something that is so deeply intimate, it's in the name of intimate partner violence. How do we ensure that the public servants that are involved in this are treating them with the kindness and the care and, the treatment that they deserve to receive? It's impossible to ensure. We can't vet every juror to make sure they're LGBT affirming, but wouldn't that be nice?
That actually leads me to an impromptu question of, do y'all do like educational trainings to folks as well?
Absolutely.
Right?
We do.
Yes. So if you're listening or watching on YouTube and you're like, I want to support more, please, please, please reach out.
Absolutely.
I listened to one of your volunteers do one of the training and she was phenomenal.
Yay! So, that's awesome. Yeah. It's one of our favorite things that we do, all of us, the staff at the Frederick Center. We love our LGBT 101 trainings. So it really is that outreach that is not actually with LGBTQ plus people that makes such a big direct difference for LGBTQ plus people. Yes. is working with the folks that might encounter us in their day to day, and maybe some people who have never met an LGBT person. And I always say when we do our trainings and outreach in general that I love being asked the terrible questions. Mm-hmm. I'd much rather you ask me inappropriate or potentially offensive question than ask your trans neighbor or your student or just the person that you might encounter in the day-to-day. It's an honor to be able to be kind of the person that gets to help someone understand a little bit better and have perhaps a different perspective, perhaps a kinder perspective, a more empathetic perspective for LGBTQ plus folks. So we're always happy to do LGBT 101.
And connecting that issue. I mean, at the end of the day, really our goal is for people to realize that queer people are just like literally everybody else in society. And so a lot of our training is spent helping connect the issues between your lived experience that might not be queer related and queer people's lived experience. And I usually use my family in those scenarios to help explain. And I tell people all the time, the best part about doing the training is I get to work through all kinds of family trauma for free while we're doing this training. So
lived experience.
yeah, exactly. So we're able to talk through these things and use those examples.
Do it for Chris.
Yes, do it for me. Yes.
No, but truly, and I hope one day that it is mandated that everyone knows this information and that everyone cares and has the empathy and kindness to learn this information. But since we're not there yet, if you're listening to this again, I highly encourage you to reach out to the Frederick Center.
Check us out at thefrederickcenter.org.
And Hartley does versions of training as well, right?
Yes.
On intimate partner violence and healthy relationships and how to build. And it's just been beautiful. The symmetry between the two organizations over the years has been so wonderful. So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. Try to break down those barriers all the time.
sure.
I don't know how many times I've told people we are not a shelter for just women and children.
That's right.
I think that's such a common misconception.
Yeah.
I know. And we often, have that question when folks are at the Center for Resources with us. Is that place going to be affirming? Is Hartley House going to be affirming? Is, the Beyond Shelter going to be affirming? And we're in these emergent situations that can sometimes truly be life or death. And they're still having that pause of, I know this is a life or death situation, but am I going to be abused or harmed or, hate crimed if I go receive a service there?
And no one should feel like that.
Absolutely.
And a great story just about Hartley and the partnerships over the years that we've been able to build and be able to address issues. For years, Hartley has always done amazing work. It had its annual event, Walk a Mile in Her Shoes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was where people would walk in high heels. And it was actually a partnership between two, Nina Carr, who worked at the Hartley, and M. Perper, who worked at the Frederick Center. And they got together and they said, we should really have a program that's all inclusive because everybody experiences domestic violence and intimate partner violence and sexual violence. And so we should make it walk a mile in their shoes and we should change the high heel to a sneaker. And so, yeah, two amazing individuals who came together. And because both organizations were opening to talking to one another and being able to build that community together, we were able to make that change. And that program, I think, just continues to be one of the most amazing opportunities to shed light on these issues.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. And shout out to Nina Carr too, who I still keep in touch with.
Yes.
I just saw her recently.
And shout out to M. Perper.
God.
I gotta throw M in
We
there.
miss you, M.
We miss you, M.
Sorry, I hadn't met them.
Yeah, right. No, that's fair.
A well-loved human.
Yes.
But absolutely. And for folks listening too, we also have a Healing Pride group therapy as well. So that's specifically for folks who experience intimate partner violence and are part of the queer community.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And, sorry.
No, go
You're
ahead.
gonna say something?
No.
Okay. We've kind of talked about this already, but are there any other ways that abuse can be overlooked or minimized in same gender or non-binary relationships?
Absolutely. I think, and I didn't think about this, but when Chris and I were talking about this topic, he brought up that, as is the case when it is a woman who is abusing their male partner, that is often minimized, and men are very often discouraged from reporting. And, it all comes back to sexism and misogyny and that. But we have to imagine that it would be the same for male relationships, that men who are in abusive relationships with men are also discouraged from reporting. Yeah. And I think a lot of times fellow members of the LGBT community, even when they're experiencing such harm from other queer people, we have this instinct to protect each other because we already face such institutional, systemic difficulties. Well, I don't want to have to report Chris. He's faced such hardships as a gay man, but if that is necessary, that's necessary. And so I think there's a lot of minimization inside our own community of, we don't want to report each other. We don't want to call upon law enforcement. We don't want to, add to their hardship when we've already endured such hardships as queer people.
Right. If you're a member of the queer community, you're already aware of those challenges. And then if you're being abused by a person in the queer community, you think what that hardship is going to look like when they go through the criminal justice system. This is a real thing that we hear from clients on the ground here at our center, is folks feeling kind of this stigma of not just like, I'm a man and I'm a male, I'm male identifying, I shouldn't be experiencing violence. So that's stigma. But then you add on that layer and folks are like, I have the stigma of, do I really report my community that I know is going to go through this really potentially awful process that statistically at least is backed up over and over and over again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that too, of that, finding that hard balance, right? Of like, I've gotten so much support from this community and I don't want to turn my back on this community, but also if you're experiencing violence, you deserve support and safety.
Absolutely.
100%. And
sure.
That I was going to say something else too. And I know you talked a little bit about using the term like gender-based violence. And I like to use the term power-based violence. And I think I've already shared or said that term as we were talking, but I like to use the term power-based violence, and that Hartley House works with specific kinds of power-based violence, because power-based violence is all around us.
Right.
But I think that's a better like overall wording for intimate partner violence.
More encompassing.
Yes, exactly. Because at the root of it, it really is about power and control. It doesn't it doesn't discriminate in that way of like anyone can be a victim or a survivor, right?
Right.
Like you said, the systems are built up very gendered, like still. So don't get me wrong there, but I think we need to move more towards this idea of power-based violence, and that really widens what we can see as violence.
Right. Right. Because it's not always the competition of multiple genders or the same gender, but rather it's, the power component to it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And then I think that brings into the like, okay, well, is the legal system a component in controlling that person? Because from what I'm gathering from our conversation, what I've seen is oftentimes abusers will use the legal system to maintain power control over the survivor.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
Let's see. What does affirming survivor-centered care look like for anyone within the LGBTQIA plus community, but specifically trans folks as well?
So this is a intake to a lifetime of living as a survivor, really from the very first step when the person comes forward. What does that process look like? That includes intake forms, that includes properly culturally trained staff that know how to work with community members, that's looking at all of the wraparound services and making sure that we are instituting a set of wraparound services that do not re-traumatize those individuals, that's looking systemically at what is the layout of the facilities that they're going to look like? How are we treating those individuals as they come through our doors to make sure that they know that this is a safe and affirming space that they can be in, that they can open up and share. Whenever we do training for our hospital, I always start with, if the goal at the end of the day in your emergency room is to get to the core of the problem, right? What is the root problem that this individual is experiencing? And that individual is hiding a huge portion of their life out of fear and anxiety and stigma that has been kind of put on top of them, then we're never going to get to the root of the problem, right? And so why would we not want to figure out ways to make sure that we are messaging to LGBTQ plus people that this place is a safe, welcoming, and affirming environment where you can share all of the details whether you are an individual, people just experiencing same-sex attraction, or if they're part of the LGBTQIA plus community, we need all of that information in order to treat the individual effectively. The same thing goes with intimate partner violence and all of our social programs that we use and behavioral health programs that we use to assist those individuals. We need to make sure that it's a clear, delineated process from step one all the way through the rest of life, as this will likely carry with them throughout the rest of their lives.
Well said. I think our emphasis at the center is often on trauma-informed care, because not only is intimate partner violence in and of itself traumatic, but oftentimes LGBTQ plus people are living through their trauma day to day, especially right now in our current political climate. We're, and the way that we are seeing the news constantly on our phones at all times. Chris and I are being impacted not literally through the politics of what's happening in Alabama or Florida or Texas, but the minority stress, the overall impact that all queer people face in the United States, that, having the perspective of, we understand that not only is your current experience that you're going through directly traumatic, but we are living in traumatic times and we are undergoing things that are really hard to endure. And a lot of times that results in folks feeling alone and separated from their community, and having a trauma-informed care approach is vital to making sure that trans folks feel supported and cared for and have their lived experience honored and valued for what it is, which is, very important.
Yeah.
And I really do feel like it truly is all interconnected, because we also see the same thing too with intimate partner violence. The harder economic times we have, usually the more lethal the abuse is, and the more abuse we see, it's all interconnected. That stress is so connected. And I agree. I hear what you're saying too, of like, okay, we're in Maryland, but that doesn't mean that what we're seeing in another state isn't impacting people. What if they have family or friends from that place too, right? Or what if they wanted to travel there, right? Like, those are all things that are going to impact individuals.
Absolutely. Right. And, especially as transgender folks are questioning whether or not we're able to leave the country, and that, being impacted by your record keeping, I don't think it is Alabama. Where was it that the driver's license?
Missouri?
Tennessee. They, or I think there was something similar in Missouri, but obviously it's everywhere right now. But the impact on our ability to record keep impacts our ability to leave a dangerous situation with a partner. So if your birth certificate is in Maryland and you have family in Tennessee and you need to flee your home because of intimate partner violence, like it's transgender oppression in American society impacts us everywhere and in everything that we do, and impacts our ability to receive, safety when we're undergoing things that are so horrific, such as intimate partner violence.
Yeah. And imagine, when we go through this process, this deeply emotional process of dealing with trauma like this, imagine being an individual that says, okay, these resources are available to me. This system is available to me. I live in Maryland. The Maryland judicial system is available to me. But if anything begins to cross a federal threshold, then suddenly it's not available to me. Suddenly it's not just unavailable. It's openly antagonistic to who I am. And so the feeling of knowing that is never going to be, that is not a resource for you, whereas the rest of the population has multiple avenues to go through, is also deeply distressing. And so we try to acknowledge that we're dealing with all of that stress as well.
Absolutely. Not to mention that there are LGBTQIA plus folks everywhere in every single state too. Absolutely. Right? So regardless of where it's happening, it's going to impact people.
And the percentages are going up. That's the problem. Every year we see updated records that show the national trend for all populations is going up. Young people are obviously leading the way, but our second fastest growing population is our seniors population. And that's because beyond young people, seniors are noticing today that, oh my gosh, I'm at a certain age at my point in life, and I never had the opportunity to truly be who I am. And here I'm coming up and I'm looking at these young people who are just living their most authentic selves. And we're seeing all of the benefits of the suicide rates, going down. Not that they're anywhere close to in a healthy range, but they're going down as people come out and they're affirmed by society. They're going, oh, I should come out as well. And so we're seeing this huge uptick in the senior population coming out at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know. And I feel like that's also something that's been, that language has been manipulated in really problematic ways to it. So I really appreciate the way in which you said that, right? Because you are the expert, that it's not that it's like a disease. It's that that representation matters. Yeah. Seeing other people living authentically matters.
It really does.
And that gives other folks agency to say and to think, oh, this person can live that way. I can live my truth as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And
sorry. Oh, I apologize. I'm going to say one quick thing. I was just going to say, and this connects right back to intimate partner violence, because the more that we break down silos as a gay man growing up in this community, as somebody who experienced I will say, aggressiveness of older generational gay men and their determination that my body there was no consent needed to touch my body whenever they wanted, and that kind of behavior that they experienced coming up, that was all buried in darkness. It was all hidden behind closed doors at parties, at community events. And what we're now seeing is that as more queer people begin to identify those actions and say, actually, this is my body. Yes. You will get consent before you touch it. You will get consent before you make decisions about what happens to me. You're seeing more and more people come forward. So you're seeing the breaking out of that darkness and that light being shown in. And as people see more queer people come forward, more queer people feel safe to come forward. And so I'm very happy to see that, just connect it back to that point about queer people coming out.
Yeah, for sure. And to both of your points about representation and, I think a lot of LGBTQ plus young people don't get to see what a healthy queer relationship looks like as adults. Mm-hmm. And it's one of my favorite parts about working with our youth groups is that, I'm openly polyamorous. And so I'm married and I have another partner. And we all live together. And the joy and immense validation that comes of our young people getting to see a queer adult in queer relationships living happily and healthily. And, what does it look like to have a relationship that is built on consent and built on care and love, and as opposed to, I think, the opposite. So we've had a really lovely conversation the last couple of weeks with our youth groups about consent, and it has been so important. And Chris and I have felt very strongly about making sure that the center, we're not confronting instances of consent on a case-by-case basis, but rather taking a holistic approach to all of our support groups, to our entire community, to everyone who enters our door, that it is a foundation for a safe space, or we call ourselves a safer space. Mm-hmm. No space is truly safe in the world. We exist in the world. We live in a society. So taking those steps to make sure that everybody who enters our safer space feels empowered and, recognizes each other's autonomy for our bodies. And, we go over our guidelines every single Wednesday before youth group. And some of the most important ones are don't touch each other or belongings without explicit permission. We had this long, beautiful discussion where the kids got to really lead the way in what consent means for them and what healthy relationships look like between each other, and how do we dismantle these power-based relationships that result in harm, either sexual or physical violence, emotional violence. How do we give that representation of this is what a healthy relationship can look like, and this is how you can build your healthy relationships together. And queerness does not have to be a factor in, you don't have to endure the horrors in order to receive the joys of a healthy relationship. You can live a healthy relationship from childhood on up to adulthood, and there's always people who are here to support you. We'll involve your parents in the conversation. We can help you report. We can help you make sure that they're very sweet. We get a lot of young people who are asking for advice and asking myself and our co-facilitators about, am I doing the right thing in my relationship? Am I treating this person the way that I think they deserve to be treated? There's a lot of care that goes into that. And so it's been really lovely to get to have that representation for the kids. I think we all deserve representation of our community members, people and relationships who look like us, who can be healthy and happy and live full lives that do not have to end in trans suicide or murder or, a lot of the horror stories that we read about our community. That does not have to be your reality. We can instead change your reality and make sure that you have that through our services and through community.
And this is a state policy that we looked at very closely last year. We passed a bill that Delegate Vanessa Atterbury brought forward, and I was a big supporter. I got to be part of the team that led the floor defense on that bill. And one of the conversations that we had was, why are we teaching an all-inclusive sexual health curriculum? Why do we need to build a fully inclusive sexual health curriculum? And when I talked to my colleagues who are on the other side of the aisle, I said, if your goal is simply to minimize, decrease the amount of sexual violence that happens in our communities, and your goal is to stop child molestation, child abuse, if your goal is to stop unhealthy relationships and intimate partner violence, this is the key. You have to have education around these conversations. And that's what makes organizations like Hartley and the Frederick Center and so many others so important to this, is they are opening the door and shining light on what a healthy relationship looks like. And by, in turn, making it very crystal clear what is not a healthy relationship, and opening the door for people to say out loud that I'm uncomfortable, I don't like what you're doing, and moreover, I'm not going to continue to experience this, and when necessary, also go to the necessary authorities and report that information out so that the actions stop.
Absolutely, because that is not common knowledge.
Right.
And like you said, the representation of what healthy looks like matters and is so important. And for many individuals, that's not necessarily modeled either in
For sure.
their childhood and them growing up too. So it's all such important work.
Really is.
I really appreciate everything that y'all are doing.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
We're gabbers.
Yeah. We could do this for hours.
I love it so much. It feels like it's only been like 10 minutes.
Yeah, right.
But okay, so what's one thing listeners can do today to support survivors?
That is, it's always a great question. And I go back to the same thing that we do every day, that when somebody walks in and reports to us that something has happened, the first thing you do is you stop and listen. And the second thing you do is you believe what they're saying. So many survivors, I think you cited a statistic earlier, which is so critical to understand. So many survivors stay and hide what has happened to them, because when they finally built up the courage to say something, it was either ignored or dismissed. And that is the root cause of so much of the culture of silence that we've built, and the culture of darkness around intimate partner violence and domestic violence and sexual violence. And we have to undo that. We have to fix that. We can't allow that to continue. And the first way to do that is when a survivor comes forward is you stop and you listen. You don't have to poke holes through their story. You're listening and you are taking it in and you are believing them.
Even well-intentioned questions can feel like you're trying to poke
interrogation.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I 100% agree. Focus on that active listening.
Yep.
Yeah. And we often, take the perspective of it is not for us to determine what is true, because if this person is taking these steps to say what has happened to them, that is their perspective and their lived experience. And I am not judge, jury, and executioner. And our role is to provide support. And so we do our best to look at the circumstances and offer whatever methods of support will be applicable. And so if an individual is trying to support another person, I encourage them to offer what you can offer and offer no more, and assist with, receiving referrals. Like if I can help take you somewhere where you'll be able to receive that support. If you can't provide that level of support, that's okay. But ensuring that the person who is trusting you with their story receives the care that they want and the care that they're asking for, that's a huge way to positively impact them and help them feel heard and believed and supported in that storytelling and the sharing of what has happened to them.
Give them your love and kindness. Don't give them your opinion. Simple as that.
I love that. That is definitely one to remember and to underline. And hold. Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming in today, Chris and Gloria. I so appreciate it. This episode will be out in June, so I'm not sure if you wanted to plug anything else.
Happy Pride.
Yes.
You know what we're plugging. Frederick Pride Parade, our second annual parade, will be happening on the 26th, and our 14th annual Pride Festival will be on the 27th. We're very excited for that.
Yes.
There's always lots of festivities going on throughout June, but we celebrate Pride year-round at the Frederick Center. We always encourage anyone who needs support. We are open 9 to 5 Monday through Friday at 5 East 2nd Street. So stop on in and say hello, and check us out on thefrederickcenter.org and see what is going on for our events. Come and get involved. And
you can see the amazing folks at Hartley House in person at Frederick Pride, and they're always there with their tables set up.
Are they registered?
All kinds of good stuff. Yeah, they go back and double check the records now, but Hartley is always there.
I'll have to confirm with Jen.
And that's what we love. That's what we love, this relationship. It's been 15 years strong, so thank you for everything.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Truly, you are making Frederick a safer place.
Ditto.
As are you, my friend.
Ditto. Yep.
It's a collaborative effort. We can't do it alone.
Yep.
Thanks for having us on this vitally important topic.